The showrunner of House of the Dragon, Ryan Condal, sat down with George R.R. Martin when the series was in its early stages, and Martin enforced three things that he wanted to see in the show. These are not necessarily core elements of the show as a whole, but rather kind of details that should be added potentially to enhance certain elements of it. The first of these is colorful dragons. This makes complete sense given the complete volume of dragons that we have in this work, because there are, I think, 17 during the Dance of the Dragons, and were they all as monotone as they were in Game of Thrones, that might be very difficult to keep track of. Secondly, is a focus on bright heraldry, which makes sense because he's made a lot of very ornate history for all of these houses, and seeing the kind of heraldry come to life is something really cool that I love as a book reader. I'm sure he would love to see as well. The third is the strangest, and one that I wanted to talk about today. That being Jaehaerys II. Jaehaerys II is the 16th Targaryen king of Westeros, and he doesn't rule until 140 years after the Dance of the Dragons. So what exactly does he have to do with this story, and what George R. R. Martin wants to continue to do with this universe? That's what I'm going to break down today for you all. If you enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, all that. And also, keep in mind, this will have no spoilers for House of the Dragon. Jaehaerys II is far enough removed from House of the Dragon to not really need to worry about anything being spoiled, because, as I said, it's 140 years in the future, and nothing pertaining to the exact events that we've seen is particularly relevant. It's worth noting that Jaehaerys II was completely removed from Game of Thrones in the show canon. The order of Targaryen kings at the end of the dynasty went Aegon V to his son, Aerys II, the Mad King, whereas in the book, it's Aegon V, followed by Aegon's son, Jaehaerys II, followed by Jaehaerys' son, Aerys II. So it adds this extra generation into the history, which could add to potential other elements of the show. It seems that Martin's core desire in wanting Jaehaerys to be included in this show in some way is that idea of him kind of correcting the mistake of Game of Thrones, as perhaps this one generation in between is something important, or could be tied to something important for the future of the show universe. So who was Jaehaerys II? Jaehaerys was the second-born son of King Aegon V. Aegon V's oldest son, Duncan Targaryen, abdicated his position from the throne in order to marry someone that he loved. Jaehaerys also broke a betrothal to marry someone he loved. However, this was something that was a lot less inconvenient for the dynasty, as it was a practice the Targaryens had done for a long time. Jaehaerys, true to form with the other Jaehaerys king of Westeros so far, married his sister by running off, and doing so without permission of either of his parents. Both of his parents were quite not happy with this, and because of this, it caused some initial strife, but it ended up being resolved because Jaehaerys was the heir to the throne and an important part of the dynasty going forward. However, King Aegon and a lot of his descendants are killed in the fire at Summerhall. This is a massive disaster in the history of Game of Thrones. It wiped out a generation of Targaryens, and is the reason that there were so few in the main series, because so many of them died in this tragic event. However, Jaehaerys II survived, and because his father perished in the flames of Summerhall, Jaehaerys assumed the throne. So what exactly happened during Jaehaerys II's reign? Not much. If I were to rank the Targaryen kings of Westeros, I would say that Jaehaerys had probably the second least influential reign out of all of them. Not much happens, save for one potentially important event. This being the War of the Nine Penny Kings, or the Fifth Blackfyre Rebellion. So this conflict was essentially a carryover of a conflict from Essos, where a group called the Band of Nine had seized the Stepstones, and Jaehaerys feared they would use these islands as a base of operation to launch a war on the Seven Kingdoms. He was kind of the least warlike out of Aegon's sons. However, he did assemble a very capable army in order to defend the Seven Kingdoms from these events. So this massive army departs from Westeros, goes down to the Stepstones, and begins fighting this band of 9 kings from Here's Essos. My theory involving Jaehaerys II. I think the reason that George R. R. Martin wants him to be included in House of the Dragon, or at least in the show canon going forward, is to create a show based on Robert's Rebellion. And I'll tell you why. That's because the War of the Nine Penny Kings is the single most important event in establishing Robert's Rebellion. So if we were to get a show about these events, about essentially what happened in the Game of Thrones world 20 years before the main series, where all of these characters like Ned Stark, Robert Baratheon, Rhaegar Targaryen are having their big conflict, the main thing that kind of sets this entire thing up is the War of the Nine Penny Kings. I'm going to explain exactly every single important alliance and relationship for Robert's rebellion is established during the War of the Nine Penny Kings. This is where Lord Stephen Baratheon, the father of Stannis, Robert, and Renly, makes friends with a young Jon Arryn and Ned Stark's father. This alliance is why Robert and Ned are fostered at Jon Arryn's and why the two of them make such a strong bond. And that bond is what the war is essentially built on, because without that bond and without the support of the North, Robert's cause would have collapsed on itself nearly immediately. Additionally, this is where Lord Hoster Tully makes friends with one Lord Baelish, and his son, Peter Baelish, will later be sent to be fostered at Riverrun because of the friendship made during this war. It also does a good job of establishing what I believe to be the second most important relationship of this rebellion, that being the relationship between Tywin Lannister and Aerys II. Aerys is just a prince at this point, and this is why I think Jaehaerys' presence is important. The king himself would likely not go and be fighting on the Stepstones in order to save his kingdom, as he would not want to put himself in harm's way unless he was someone like maybe Robert who wants to seek glory. But I don't think that Aerys II was necessarily that much of a glory seeker. But these two form a very close friendship, and it's actually Aerys who knights Tywin Lannister. It could be really interesting to see both the initial kind of conception of this relationship and how it deteriorates in the years past. I also really like the fact that both of these conflicts take place in the Stepstones, which is a location that was very heavily established in House of the Dragon Season 1. So if we do go back there in a future season of either House of the Dragon or Robert's Rebellion, the show, I don't know what they'd call it, they could very much have an established setting there, whereas just kind of pulling it out of nowhere might be difficult for some people who have only seen the show, and understandably so. It's also worth noting that I would absolutely love to see this conflict for no other reason than to see young Barristan the Bold taking down the Blackfires, because this is the main event that gives him his title and prestige that he still carries in the main series. And he's such a fun and interesting character, and I really enjoy him. He's one of my favorite point of views in A Dance with Dragons. And I think that hopefully this could maybe make up for him being killed off so unceremoniously in Season 5 of the show. Only one point of view character ever met Jaehaerys II, that being Barristan Selmy, but he thinks quite highly of the king. This is kind of in contrast to what most other people think of Jaehaerys, as he was kind of sickly and didn't really do much throughout his rule, as I said earlier, and as might be my own opinion. But it is worth noting that he is very held in high regard by Barristan Selmy, which is something that is definitely worth something. He thinks he was a very capable king, despite the fact that Jaehaerys II only ruled for 3 years. The brevity of that rule, it being only 3 years, does make a bit of sense as to why they might have cut that out of the show, just for simplicity's sake, just to not have another king on the list of things that people would need to know. But I am quite happy to see, hopefully, him coming back in a future iteration of House of the Dragon. While I do think that we will get a show based on Robert's Rebellion at some point in the future, be it near or far off, I don't think that it'll be for a little while. Particularly given to the fact that the War of the Nine Penny Kings is the 5th and final Blackfire Rebellion. It would be pretty important to establish the Blackfire Rebellions before showing the final conflict here, especially given the fact that this is probably the least Blackfire-related of the Blackfire Rebellions, as Maelys the Monstrous is only one of these Nine Penny Kings. What I would predict they're going to do after these first couple seasons of House of the Dragon covering the events of the Dance of the Dragons is that I think they'll get into the first Blackfire Rebellion, the events surrounding that, and then maybe go from there to the War of the Nine Penny Kings, and then into Robert's Rebellion. Because I do think Robert's Rebellion would be a great era to cover, and I think it'd be cool to see all of these familiar characters as their younger selves, and see glimpses of what they might develop into. So yeah, this has been the video on Jaehaerys II, who he is, and why I think George R.R. Martin wants him in House of the Dragon. What do you think of Jaehaerys II as a king, and of Martin wanting to include him in the show? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe while you're down there. Really appreciate it. Always helps the channel, and I will have many more videos coming in the near future, including a ranking of the Targaryen kings, which I'm still working on, but I'm excited to share it with you because I have some fun rankings throughout. I think you'll like seeing them. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Have a good one.